Are you asking yourself, might I be stuck in grief? Am I stuck in grief? If you're asking yourself that question, then this video is for you, because in this video, we are going to explore that question. We are going to ask, am I stuck in grief? We're going to answer that question. We are going to explore what might be keeping you stuck. And then I'm going to give you 4 tips to help you get unstuck. So let me start by saying that if you're asking yourself the question, or if you came to this video because you saw the question that said, am I stuck in grief? And you think you might be stuck, then you likely are. So I hope that landed okay. If you think you are stuck in grief, then you likely are. So most people are familiar with the 5 stages of grief, right? Anger, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And most people think that you move through those at whatever rate. They hope it goes faster than it's going. And that eventually you'll just get to acceptance, right? And acceptance is the place where you accept what has happened and you found a way to be okay with it. Now, we can talk in another video about how what Grief Inspired talks about moves beyond acceptance. It moves to an area where you come to terms with it in a way to be inspired. That's where the Grief Inspired comes from. To be inspired to live a certain way, to live in a way that honors your loved one, the people that you've lost, because you're the one who's still living. You are the one who is still here. But we'll talk about that in another video. So when we're talking about grief and whether or not we're stuck, the grief process, as you know, takes time. So you do have to give yourself a little grace and be gentle on yourself, because sometimes we dismiss grief. We dismiss the magnitude of the emotions we're feeling. We dismiss the tragedy that we might have undergone. So don't be in that scenario. Give yourself a little bit grace and tell yourself, and if you're here and you're looking for support and you're looking for videos, then this is a big deal to you. And so that means it is really important. And so it's something to pay attention to. So now most people, when we talk about being stuck, right? So if you're stuck, what that means is that you don't feel like you're really moving through the grief process, that you're not moving forward at a regular pace, that there are certain things that you can't let go. So, right? So getting unstuck is about letting go. It's not about dismissing the emotions, but it's about moving through your emotions and then letting it go and saying, okay, I can move on. I've cried it out. I'm ready to move forward to what's next. Most people get stuck in depression, anger, and guilt is a huge one. And so if you're stuck in one of those, drop down below which one you might be stuck in. And if there's something else that you're stuck with, drop that down below too. I was reading an article in preparation for this video, and one of the things that I came across that was very interesting is that many people get stuck in anger. Anger is a very strong emotion, and oftentimes people will get stuck in anger because they're using their anger to cover up other emotions that they feel less comfortable with. So we see people getting angry all of the time. So anger, and this article was proposing that anger is a more acceptable emotion. So we can show anger and that's okay. But if we show fear, which might be underlying the anger, that might not be okay. So same thing with guilt. People will say, I feel guilty. But behind that guilt is a whole lot of shame. But we don't talk about shame in our culture today, right? But it's acceptable to say, hey, I feel really guilty. And so that's why people get stuck in guilt, or they'll get stuck in anger. Now, for me, I got stuck in depression as part of my own grief process. And I was stuck in depression for probably a good 2 years or so. And I didn't know that I was stuck, right? I didn't have at the time, I didn't have all the tools and the knowledge and information that I have. But basically what was happening was I was stuck because I was hanging on to my grief. I was hanging on to the pain. So my son died. He was 6 weeks old when he passed away. And what happened was I wasn't focusing on the time that I had him, those 6 weeks. And I stopped focusing on what I did have. And I got really stuck in all of the pain and everything that I was experiencing. And so that was what I remembered. And that's what I was focusing on. And so what I couldn't do was I couldn't let go of the pain. I couldn't let go of the depression and the sadness because I was afraid that if I did, that I would be letting go of my son. I would be letting go of who he was, that the time I spent with him, even though it was a short time, would be less meaningful, and that I would somehow be dishonoring him by letting the depression go and being happier again. Now, when I realized that that's what I was doing, and when I realized that if I let the pain go, I wasn't going to forget my son. I was terrified that I was going to forget him, that the whole thing would just disappear as if it had never happened. That was my fear that was underlying my depression. And that's why I hung on to my depression for so long. I was stuck. So when it comes to where you might be stuck, are you stuck in depression? Are you stuck in anger? Are you stuck in guilt? And ask yourself the questions, why do I feel stuck? What is going on? Why am I hanging on to anger? Why am I hanging on to depression? Why can I not move forward? What's there? Am I scared of something? And we're going to explore that a little bit more. So if you are stuck or you feel like you're stuck, here are 4 tips to help get you unstuck. First of all, you need to believe that your grief will not last forever. You need to have the fundamental belief, and hear me when I say this, you need to believe that you can move through your grief, that you can process it completely, that you can and you deserve to be happy again. That is what is supposed to happen. Now, I'm telling you that now because no one told me that. I thought I was going to be depressed and basically miserable for the rest of my life. So know that you can survive your grief, that you can be happy again, that you deserve to be happy again, and give yourself a little bit of grace because none of us are taught how to grieve. You're doing the best you can. And so there's a process where you need to educate yourself and you need to work through all of it. And it can be hard. And what I try to share, the messaging that I try to share here on Grief Inspired is you can get through it. You can do this. And if you do it, it will be worth it because you will have processed your grief and you will come out happier on the other side. Because what Grief Inspired tends to do, unlike other organizations or people that you might talk to, is we really focus on what do you have? What did you have with your loved one? As opposed to focusing on what's missing and what you've lost, right? So we go back to love and say, what did you have and what did they bring to your life? And that can be a whole nother conversation. And if you want to work one-on-one with me to begin to explore that, I am happy to do that. So just drop me an email at griefinspired@gmail.com and we'll figure out how to get you some of the support that you need. So tip number 1 was believe. You need to believe that you can get through this and believe that you can get unstuck. Tip 2 is you need to begin to take some time to dive into your emotions. And a lot of times this requires getting alone, spending some time thinking about your loved one, thinking about who you've lost, and really tapping into why you're experiencing the emotions that you are. And it's just observing what's going on. And you can ask yourself these questions. If you're really angry, you can ask, what do I fear? Is there fear behind my anger? What am I most scared of? Right? So for me, I was scared that I was going to forget my son. So what might you be scared of? Secondly, if you're feeling guilty and you're feeling very stuck in guilt, I want to encourage you to watch some of my other guilt videos here on my channel because I think they'll be helpful and they'll be ways to help you move through your guilt. But the question becomes, why am I feeling guilty? And is my guilt indeed justified, or am I just beating myself up? Because that's what we tend to do, right? We find a way to make ourselves feel better. If you're just beating up on yourself, then you feel justified in feeling guilty. And sometimes it doesn't make sense, but it's what we do. So that leads to tip 3. And tip 3 is to ask yourself a question. And you need to take some time and you need to be very honest with yourself. And this is a question you can ask yourself in the darkness of the night so that no one has to hear the answer. This is only for you. And the question is, am I benefiting in any way from being stuck? Is there an advantage? Is there something that you don't have to deal with? Is there something that you're kind of avoiding? What would happen if you were unstuck? And are you benefiting from staying stuck in any way? So that's a question to explore for yourself. And if you want to journal, you can do that. So, and by way of a journal, I've had multiple people ask me for a journal. So I am actively putting a journal together. So that is going to be available on Amazon in the next month or so. So stay tuned for that. And then lastly, tip number 4 is if you feel like you're really stuck and you've done the other things, you've explored your emotions and you don't think that you're benefiting from being stuck, then tip number 4 is to ask someone else. Go to an expert. Ask me, send me a message, again, griefeinspired@gmail.com. Find a therapist, find somebody that you really trust that you can ask these questions of. Because what happens is sometimes our emotions and the things that are most important to us become so close that it's almost like you can't see them because they're on your face. They're in your face so much that you almost can't see them. And it takes an outsider to look at what's going on with you and be able to say, well, could it be this that's going on? So if you need support in that, reach out to me or to somebody else and ask. And that's the 4th tip. And the thing that I want to emphasize here is that sometimes we feel ashamed to ask for help. And if there's there are a few key things that I really try to harp on here at Grief Inspired. And that is that there is no shame in asking for help. Asking for help is honestly a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. So please consider asking for help because it's really going to help you get through this. And again, the whole reason why we go through grief and the reason why we do this exploring of our emotions and trying to learn more about grief and what's going on is because you want to move through it, because you want to not feel terrible, because you want to process your emotions and you want to believe and you want to be happy again. And so I'm telling you that is absolutely what you can have. You can work through this. So there is no shame in asking for help. So get the help so that you can move through it more quickly. And so those are my 4 tips. So if you think you're stuck, you likely are. And the 4 tips are: tip 1, believe that you can get unstuck. Tip 2 is you need to look at it. You need to explore your emotions. Tip 3 is to ask yourself the question, am I benefiting in any way from staying stuck in my guilt or my anger or my depression? And tip 4 is if you feel like you're really stuck, then get an outsider to look into your situation, to look into your life, to look into what's going on with your emotions and give you advice about what they see. And I think those things are going to really help you get unstuck. And as always, continue to journal, continue to write it down. Grief needs a place to go. You have to get it out. So whether you're getting it out by watching these videos here or talking to a friend or talking to a coach or a therapist or a counselor, get it out. Work through this and hurry up and get back to being happy, because that's where we want to go and it is absolutely possible. So do not forget this. You can get through this. Thanks so much for watching today. Please like and subscribe and we will